This lady walks into the bar. She asks the bartender for a double entendre. The bartender gives it to her.
Still offering to the drum machine. You put another face on my heart. The stars singing for screaming, calling the odd symbol repeating. Not gonna be held back by the ranges out. No reaction without pain. I got lost. That pedal pages go. Give up the throw today.
Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a podcast about music where friends gather to share albums with each other, an album at a time, taking turns. Real fun time for all. It's like a book club for music. I'm Peter Rave, your man with no plane. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew. We've got Brett.
Marion Cobretti is still staring at me. I know I say it every week. Wednesdays are bad. Meow.
Yes. We've got Drew.
Lemonade was a popular drink.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is.
Yes. And we've got David.
Eep, op, orc, that means I love you.
I did not. It's been probably 20 years since I've heard that deed. So,
yes. All right. And then, of course, we have a guest in the house. This guest has been invited by Drew. Drew, who have you invited into the house?
So me and this dude go way back. Been friends for years. We're in a band for a few of those. One of the better musicians I know. And a guy who's been talking about like doing his own podcasting things. Hasn't started any, and I've been egging him on to, so I decided to try to drag him along on this shit show. It's a friend of mine, Jacob Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
What's up?
Yeah. Jake, you have an album for us. You're providing, since it's your first time, of course, you are bringing an album to share with the Midnight Society. What do you got for us, Jake?
So I decided to pick something a little bit different. This is an artist by the name of Waterflame, and the album title is called Adventure. It's what I would consider MIDI orchestral meets video game music. It's very happy, very upbeat stuff. It's one of my favorites, which is why I wanted to bring it forward.
Mm-hmm. Drew, I'll start with you. What were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I knew going into this very, very little about this particular artist. I knew what Jake told me when he said he was thinking about bringing this or another album. Chick Corea, I think you said, was the other one, if I remember our conversation correctly. And he said, and there was this like video game chiptune type guy, and I'm thinking about bringing two. And I sort of know where his headspace is when it comes to like electronic techno type stuff. So I sort of had an idea that there was going to be there was going to be a lot of stuff going on. But besides that, I didn't really know what we were getting into as far as like specifics.
Mm-hmm. David, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
Absolutely none. 0.0. But I like it that way. I like being surprised and having no idea what I'm expecting. I prefer it when it's something that I've never heard before and isn't one of the most recognized albums of all time. So I was very excited.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, I also had no clue, nor had I ever heard of this fella. But I did a few Google searches and found links from 2007 to Newgrounds. So I was like, okay, that's all that I need to know. I'm going to go and listen to this blind, and that was it. I myself also had very little to no expectations. All I saw was in the related artists on Spotify was Danny B. So I was like, I kind of know a little bit what I'm getting into, though not exactly. Yeah, this is very much not Danny B, but like, wow.
but it's
not Danny Brown either.
No.
Yes.
But there's a throughput there. But let's talk about it musically. Jake, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements that make it up?
A lot of MIDI. That's the first thing I think of. Everything is programmed 100%. The composer uses FL Studio or Fruity Loops. So for me, theme-wise, it's going to be very, very straight or straight swung because it's all programmed. Overall themes, again, we're sticking with video games here, so it's going to be very happy, very upbeat, up-tempo, generally speaking. There's a few songs not so much. But I would say that's the overwhelming theme. This particular artist also has written a lot of soundtracks. So at least for me, I knew going into this that it was going to be it all goes together very well, like a soundtrack. So I would say those are some of the more defining features.
Mm-hmm. I remember back in the day purchasing Fruity Loops and trying it out. It was fun.
Yeah.
I never got the hang of it.
Please support the official release.
Yes. I don't think I've ever paid for
it. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
I was going to say, Jake definitely bought that. Definitely bought Fruity Loops. Well, as I said, I sort of knew going into this sort of where when Jake listens to chiptune stuff, I sort of know the artist he really gravitates towards. And it's, like I said, stuff with a good amount going on and good thought process to it, but nothing down like weird rabbit holes per se. It's something that like this can be transplanted into a game very easily. I think, like Jake said, it fits together very well. There's a definite through line to it because it's very well thought out. There's an adventurous sort of feel to it. It's very major, very upbeat, very happy to it, which name of the album figures the quote unquote strings that come in from time to time. I say that with air quotes for the audio listeners because obviously this is all programmed, but the strings that come in from time to time, the keys and the synths used, the tone of it is something that hits that note to me that is that very sort of diving into something feet first sort of feel to it. It's, you put this to a game and it's something that like, if we're going to transplant this into a game, because he's done game soundtracks before, Castle Crashers, Geometry Dash, stuff like that. This would be more if there was like an exploration game, if he's doing like, if No Man's Sky were way more upbeat than it is, like you could transplant this into that. There is, it's weird talking about electronic music because you try to talk about the instrumentation when it's programmed. And there's not specific instruments you can like pull out and say, oh, this instrument, because it's not. But listening to this, it's like, okay, yeah, this is really well thought out. It reminded me at times of another name that I'm going to throw out there that is, I think, a friend of the show that I showed Jake to, and I think Jake really likes, which is Big Giant Circles. I got a vibe of that off of a lot of this. There's a lot of crossed influences. Now, they're both operating at around the same time, so I can't say one influenced the other, obviously, but like there's definite shades of that style going into it. The Danny B sort of crossover, I think, fits in terms of
also
it's all operating within. Yeah, another friend of a friend. Like that whole the Big Giant Circles, this guy, the Danny B, Popsky, like that whole like chiptune scene right now is very much sharing, I think, and I think that's really cool because you start to see where the influences intersect and where they diverge, and I think that's really fun. It's a big, bright, fun record. Overall, it has a lot of good stuff going on, but it never muddies itself, being overcomplicated, which I think is good. but it's not. It never lends itself to just being boring or monotonous.
Deej, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this at first as an album that I really wasn't quite sure how to classify. When I saw that the artist behind it had done video game work, I tried placing it in a particular genre of game, and it took me a little while. A few listens through, it made me come to the conclusion that, this feels like it could be a racing soundtrack. Something that would go really well in a racing game. Maybe not the Gran Turismos or the Forzas of the world, but something with a little bit more of a cartoony look to it, or something more video gamey as
Sonic
far as a
Team
racing
Racing
game
Evolved.
goes.
I was gonna say Sonic
Almost.
Racing.
You almost got it. You almost got it, Brett. I'm proud of you. Almost. You were close.
That's the only Sonic racing game I could come up with, and I don't even know if that's the name of the game.
You were close. I appreciate that it did not have the typical bleeps and bloops, and there were moments that were very cinematic, which I appreciated. As Drew said, these were all very major in its sound, which you'd think I would appreciate, but I'm more... I'm more inclined to enjoy something from an artist from France known as The Architect, which is more on the heavier, minor key, darker side of this style of music. But I liked how cinematic a lot of the songs were. It felt like more than just something that you'd hear on a SoundCloud in that way. And I appreciated that.
Brett, how would you describe this album musically?
Good, like SoundCloud. No, we're reviewing an album that doesn't have lyrics and it's fully digital, which is something that we've done before. Hell, I've even brought albums that were all bleeps and bloops. But I don't exactly have the vocabulary to describe it at all with my words. So I'm going to describe the things that I can.
Give us the sproing, Brett.
Well, no, they're actually... You can't call the sproing when the entire album's a sproing. It's kind of hard. But I did hear...
when everything's a sproing, nothing is a sproing.
Yes. CeeLo Green said that. No, I heard that, like, a lot of things that reminded me, like, the late 90s Sega arcade soundtracks, like you're walking through a GameWorks studio, which is never a bad thing. I heard a little bit of 16-bit Rare, especially Uniracers type stuff. But there was also... like the parts that remind me of the a little not the like the rare games like Donkey Kong Country, but the weird stuff, like the kind of a little bit even before that, the snake rattle and roll type stuff, the way that things are laid out. There were parts that remind me more contemporary Nintendo stuff that have a lot of mallet percussion and strings as I there's even a little bit of that like classic Mega Man digital Iron Maiden Steve Harris like galloping thing that video games do, that where they harmonize the melody in different voices like they was guitars. All the songs have very solid hooks. They take their time. This is a 65-minute album, like with 5-minute songs. It's the time that nobody's in a hurry on this album. So nothing feels really rushed. But I also didn't think anything really overstayed its welcome.
Yeah, I think I had a couple of thoughts listening to this album where I felt like multiple times I felt like I wanted to play the game that this was the soundtrack to, even if it wasn't like whatever that game is, even though it doesn't exist. I wanted to be playing that game.
I think it's a racing game.
Yeah.
I would suggest Bit Trip Runner.
Yeah,
because I was getting that off of one of these songs, which we'll probably go into.
I was getting Contra Hardcore off of some of this.
Dear God.
Very Genesis. Like,
yeah,
the use
Contra is a very rare game. It's a very niche product.
But no, Contra Hardcore has like some weird organ like that they put in everywhere, like the digital organ. Like,
yes.
Okay.
People would line up around the block to buy a digital organ.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about some of the tracks. Jake, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on?
For me, the most notable track is going to be the 6th song. It's called "The Race Around the World." Ironically, you guys were talking about how it makes you think of a racing game. This particular song always makes me feel like I'm playing Mario 64, where you race the penguin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but this song, literally the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm racing a penguin. What's going on?
Don't cheat. Don't go through that hole in the wall.
Right. So I think that one's the most noticeable or notable for me because it's so memorable. Outside of that, I think my favorite song would be the 12th one. It's called Time Machine. To me, it's just a very well written song. I like that it goes different places. It's not the same all the time. As Drew mentioned, I like a lot of music that goes different places. I don't like things that is just the same all the time. So for this one, for that particular song, it really moves around, and I really appreciated that as a writer myself. And it keeps you interested, which is something that I love in music in general. So I tend to gravitate towards those types of songs.
Mm-hmm. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Well, first, the Blue Planet. This is the one where I heard it and I was like, this is like the tone of it reminded me very much of like Big Giant Circles at first. And then it like sort of kept going. And the more I listened to it, this is where I was like, the bouncy sort of rhythmic feel to it reminded me of the first world in the first Bit Trip Runner, which is a weird thing to just randomly pull out of my brain because I didn't play a whole heck of a lot of that game because it was a runner and those bore me, but the music was really good in that game, so I kept playing it because of that. And then I was like, why don't they just look up the soundtrack? But like that sort of bouncy feel to it, I totally can get behind. The Super Swing Bit Orchestra, while searching and doing my notes, I found out there's a sequel, which I'm quickly going to go check out. But I can see where he was going with this, and I really can dig it. I could do an entire album of like him doing like, hey, let's make chiptune big band music, like do weird tickling the ivories, pounding a piano sort of stuff with like
doing what to the piano?
Pounding the ivories. I did this.
Okay. We're an audio show, so people could be thinking you're doing all sorts of horrible things.
That's true.
And I hope they do.
Oh yeah.
I used the term pounding. But
I'll tickle the ivories. It's better that way.
Tickle some. Then like in that song you also have like horns, and I'm gonna air quote again on horns. And just like this groove that really hit the entire time, which I think is really cool. And then I just want to mention really quick, and I'm glad I'm here in the initiative order because I was afraid Brett was going to bring this up, but is Summertime like fucking Toe Jam and Earl to anybody else, or was that just me?
I was thinking like
yes.
PS1, PS2 era menu music of something like PS1.
Like Toe Jam and Earl or Jet Set Radio. Like those were the vibes I was getting off of this track. Yes. And I loved
Sega
it.
Goodness. Yes.
Like that, like the like Sega hip 90s like feel to it.
Yes.
But with like way more like synth keys to it. Yeah, no, I was super down with that song.
For Summertime, I wrote that this almost sounds like it could be on a Vital Tectones album, but I like it anyway.
Yes.
And this is why I like jazz and electronic music.
Yes. But yeah, Deej, moving on to your picks, what will be some of the key tracks for you?
Cats! That one definitely scratched the itch in my brain that loves all things Sonic the Hedgehog. And
all things.
All things.
I mean, I'm cool with Big the Cat. Like, I'm down with Big the Cat, but Kiss...
Espio the Chameleon. Espio the Chameleon. How about that? Summertime, like I mentioned. Western Adventures
Sonic
was probably the song that had the most cinematic feel, and one that I don't think had been mentioned yet, Super Swing Bit Orchestra. I dug that one. The only one that kind of threw me off a little bit was Village Up North. That one was kind of like, Can't win them all.
Like pirate music.
Overall, those were the ones.
Mm-hmm. Cats. Brett. What would be some of the key tracks for you?
I mean, I'm going to do the Drew thing where I talk about like not all the songs, but almost. No, make a run for it. I thought that the pitch bending on the song was fun, and it fits the up tempo feel. Super swing bit orchestra. I was pretty impressed by the beat and the use of organs. It brings the ooh-woos and a kind of a synth pop beat with orchestral hits all over the place. The organ parts are pretty impressive. Saying that it came from a guy what plays a keyboard, I'm not exactly shocked, but it was better than it could have been, and I was impressed. And it did remind me of parts of the beloved Genesis game Contra Hardcore. Everybody's Contra game, that one. It's definitely noteworthy. The song, not the game. To the Skies. There was an earwormy quality to that in my playthroughs always stuck out. The time machine. When I go and look at songs and I'm listening through that I have no clue, I like to look at Spotify to see what the playlist the play counts are on the songs, and by far the most popular song on this album by plays was Time Machine. It had a little bit of Right Said Fred's "I'm Too Sexy" going on, but with it, and there was a violent, it kind of sounded like a little bit of music from like Rayman Legends or something. It was very. There's a lot going on in this album, but those were the ones those tracks stood out to me in my many listens.
Yes. A lot of solid tracks. Let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
This is something that, if you're familiar with any of the names we've sort of mentioned in the chiptune world and you haven't come across this dude, I would very much go for it. It's something that, listening to it, this is definitely one of those albums that like I'm going to have in my back pocket to throw on when I'm like getting shit done. It's like a big giant circles, Brian Altano, like just driving tech. Yeah, there's a name that you haven't heard in a while.
Yeah,
Brett.
I forgot about his music.
Brian Altano.
Yeah, he hasn't made music in a while, and I wish he would, because I don't listen to any of the podcasts he's on anymore. But it's something that the thing I always say when it's something that I actually did enjoy is I will go back through and look back at other things this guy has done, because it is something that from this, it's easily something I can throw on. It's going to be great music, and it's going to be something that like is a driving thing, which I think for video games, which is where this guy makes his bread is buttered in the video game industry, we'll say, that's what that music should do, is have you focus. And I think that does that really well, while also being a lot to like sink your teeth into, which I really dig.
Mm-hmm. Deej, how would you conclude on this album?
Waterflame is exactly the kind of person to make music for video games. This was perfect for what it was. I think that it was a little too upbeat for me and my dark, twisted soul, but it's generally really enjoyable all around. The instrumentations are very fun and easily enjoyed. I really have no quips or quibbles other than to say, if he is picked up by a major game developer for a racing game, I look forward to the soundtrack, and I look forward to playing whatever game this is.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what would be your conclusion on this album?
This album's pretty easy to listen to. It's upbeat, and it's not intrusive in any way. It's the lack of vocals makes it not unlike the way that I was listening to any other music that I listen to while I work that tends to not have lyrics. It's something you can follow along. And I was like, I had quite a bit of extra time to chew into this one. It's probably not going to get into my normal rotation. I'm very happy that I'm like familiar with this artist now and can I have the knowledge, but it's somewhat dated. It feels very much of its time, but also it's drawing from stuff that is from decades ago. You can definitely feel the influence on the album. It's a very good time. I would advise anybody, if you have the time, to listen to it. If you're this far into this podcast, I don't know why you haven't listened to it yet, but it's not going to hurt. It's good. It's just not the jump splits and pyrotechnics that I'm normally into.
I think there's a lot to like about
the
album.
Algorithm. Yeah, the algorithm. That's what I was thinking about. Not the architect. The algorithm.
Yes,
is who an artist I would recommend if you want something in more of a minor sound. The Algorithm.
This album, makes me think. Like I said, I'd rather be. I almost really would wish I was playing the game, and also it makes me miss. Makes me a little sad that we no longer have Square by Square Wave every year at South by. It's a little bummer when I found out they weren't going to have it anymore, and I kind of miss it because that's a fun show. Partially because I like drinking the beer at Fourth Tap, but also partially because it's a fun show. But yeah, Jake, how would you conclude on this album?
I would say if you grew up playing video games at all and you enjoy listening to that kind of music, or you have any memories from playing video games, this is an album you're going to enjoy. I was drawn to this because I also was using Newgrounds years and years ago. So it's a lot of
using.
Yeah.
Yes. It was an addictive thing.
So I've listened to a lot of underground, not well known, indie, for lack of a better term, electronic music. So if you're into any of that kind of stuff, I highly recommend listening to this. I also encourage you to check out his other albums. He's still writing stuff. All of it's great. If you just want to be supported. Otherwise, just going to echo some similar thoughts here. I used this a lot when I was in college studying for things. I always found this a good album to listen to, as well as just cleaning or driving. I think it's a very upbeat type of music, and I like that when I'm trying to get things done. So if you're into those types of things, you will definitely love it. If you're not, you should still give it a shot, and I think you'll enjoy it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Really quality album. You should all check out. All right, let's get into the main event of the evening. Get into our haiku reviews. It's gonna be fun. All right, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Drew, what is your haiku?
Glad I drug them on because this album was great. See you next week, Jake.
Deej, what is your haiku?
Talented, upbeat, cinematic, not gamey, fine, not amazing.
Mm-hmm. All right. My haiku, I'm gonna put myself in the middle. Enjoyed the sound, but couldn't shake the feeling I'd rather be playing. Brett, what is your haiku?
Electronic tunes from a guy with a keyboard. No room for vocals.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Jake, you have the last word. What is your haiku?
My haiku is, from start to finish, an upbeat, happy album. Take an adventure.
Mm-hmm. That is Waterflame Adventure. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Follow along at home. Do your due diligence. On the Spotify playlist. Oh, yeah, and also your due diligence.
Correct. Can't leave that off. It's a thing now.
Yes. Also on the Spotify playlist will be next week's record. The one you already know, I mentioned it last week, is going to be my album. So once again, comes back to my part of the cycle. And it's going to be a really cool album. Going back and listening to Jong Hyun's final album, the posthumous released poet artist. So it's going to be a fun discussion, a fun, nice little tribute. But we're going to talk about that next week. But that's next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. Jake, where can people find you? Where do you want to send people for your stuff and for your things?
So my go-to would be my website. It's just jacobbennettmusic.com. It's pretty dated. Forgive me for that. I'm still working on getting it reworked. But that's where I post my portfolio, a lot of my music, and all things about me.
Mm-hmm. You can, of course, also find them on Twitter at drum_wizard, as you can see if you're watching the video. And you can find us all the rest of us. David is at Please Call Me DJM. Brett is at Hibbidi-Bibbard, HIBBI2IBIBBARD. Drew is at XDruciferX. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com.
Breakers.
Yes. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube and other places. We're on everywhere you find podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Leave reviews and comments and whatnot. Feedback. Let us know what you think of the albums on each of the episodes. Yeah, until next time. Hasta los huevos.
Little toot. Little toot.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.